Now, the New York Times recently released a bombshell of a report on Donald Trump's taxes. Now, the report noted that he had lost over $1 billion of investor money and some of his father's fortune over a period of 10 years. Now, that is deeply embarrassing. Now, he responded to this on Twitter by first calling it fake news and then justifying losses and claiming that if this had happened, then there was a point to it, and that point would be first it's for sport and then to avoid paying taxes. So now let's, of course, get into this. First, his tweet. He said that real estate developers in the 1980s and 90s, more than 30 years ago, were entitled to massive write-offs and depreciation, which would, if one was actively building, show losses and tax losses in almost all cases. Much was non-monetary, sometimes considered tax shelters. You would get it by building or even buying. You always wanted to show losses for tax purposes. Almost all real estate developers did, and often renegotiate with banks. It was sport. Additionally, the very old information put out is a highly inaccurate fake news hit job. So now he goes and explains, well, of course you want to go into debt when you're, when it comes to tax purposes so that you don't pay any taxes. I mean, you're stupid if you pay taxes, right? And then here's how to game essentially the system so that you pay less taxes. Oh, and not only that, but it's a fake news hit job. Lovely. So now, okay, he's claiming that instead of being the worst businessman alive, that he instead hid his money, claimed a loss on income that he made to avoid paying taxes on that income. Now that sounds a bit like tax fraud to me. Weird. Now there was a section in the report also that pointed out that this was not common. So he said, oh, no, builders do it all the time. Trust me, I'm in the business. I know better. It turns out, no, this was not common. They explained that Trump appeared to have lost more money than nearly every other individual American taxpayer. And so Donald Trump claiming all of these gigantic losses, more than anybody else in that period of time. So how common is this? Really? No, it's not common at all. He's just that big of a loser. Now, people on Twitter, of course, were a little amazed that the president defended himself in this way. That does not surprise me because he's not a very smart person. He's not a very stable genius. I think he's one of the dumbest people alive. And so making the choice between looking stupid or looking like an absolute loser, he would rather incriminate himself. Nonetheless, let's share some tweets here. Fun tweets. Finna change my last name to Stark says, did it for sport. Isn't that tax fraud? Gaming the system, not paying your fair share in order to benefit personally? Yeah, you definitely should do everything you can to stay in office. Once you're out, you're going to jail. I don't know about that part, but, and that's of course because nobody who is rich, who does a crime ever really gets in trouble. I mean, Bernie Madoff is one of the, only ones, but he committed the biggest crime that you could ever commit. You ripped off rich people. But then again, Donald Trump apparently might have also ripped off rich people. So there's that. More, the Give Smart guy says, I know that we're numb to this stuff now, but the president just said he committed felonies for which he was never prosecuted. Tim O'Brien said, translation, even though I aggressively used shelters to keep my taxes low for decades, my tax returns also show that I was a very inept businessman, kept afloat by my father's money and huge bank loans until I almost went personally bankrupt. Jimmy Burdoff says, you're admitting to tax fraud right now. Right now. Stupefud says, I'm going to play sport on my taxes. Donnie says it's fine. Yes, we should all play sport on our taxes. See what happens. More, Oliver Wilsow says, I did it on purpose. It was fun. Everyone did it. And it's a lie. I didn't do it. I love the contradictions in his explanation. Fake news, hit job, never happened. But if it did happen, this is how you would do it. Because everybody does it. More. Daniel Wessel says, Trump's best defense is to admit to tax fraud. Cool. Perry Bain says if Trump is honestly saying that the information provided in his tax returns for a full decade was all highly inaccurate information, then he just confessed to being one of the largest tax evaders in history. Hey, you know what? Maybe he should release all of his tax returns then. If you want to prove the New York Times wrong and say that information is highly inaccurate, well, then there's one way you could just give your full taxes. That would work, right? Rune Linding says, you always wanted to show losses for tax purposes. That would be tax evasion. Because again, you don't want to do that. Finally, Andrew Robinson says, show losses? Exactly. Now, you can only show losses if they actually exist. Showing losses which don't exist is fraud. Which is yours? Losses or fraud? And I'm going to go on a limb here and say a little bit of both. It's a little bit of A, a little bit of B. Now, A, of course, is that Trump is incredibly inept. He's the most inept businessman I think we've ever seen. And he's never met an inheritance that he couldn't bungle away. And B, he's corrupt. He's a fraudster. He used to run a scam where he would literally buy stock, usually on borrowed money or from his dad's fortune, boast about buying at a company, which would drive up stock prices, and then he would sell it off. He's a corporate raider. That's one of the ways that he was able to make money, right? And not only that, but are we even questioning that Donald Trump's a scam artist at this point? He ran a literal fake university. Come on, man. Really? And what's even more pathetic is that most of Trump's money belonged to other people. Banks and investors who had supplied cash to fuel his acquisitions from the report. And had continued to lean on his father's fortune in order to live like a winner. Dude, that's your president. A fraud, a cheat, and a criminal. I think it's about time. Maybe we should impeach the MFer. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.